Just what is the winter range actually like on the Peugeot E-208? If you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that I have this Peugeot E-208 as a courtesy car whilst my Citroen Ami is in for repair. And I thought, given the cold weather we've been having, it presented a really good opportunity to give you a real-world range test in the cold weather, because it is a vehicle that people talk about an awful lot and say, oh, I've got an E-208, I'm really not happy with the range in the winter. And similarly for the other cars that share the same drivetrain, like the Vauxhall E-Corsa, the Mokka, the Peugeot E-2008, and loads of other Stellantis vehicles that use exactly the same battery, same motor that's in this car. So I am actually currently now leaving the office. I didn't film the journey to work. It was a bit too dark at 5:30 this morning. If you're new here, I live in Gloucester. I work in Welwyn Garden City. I don't have to go to the office that often, thankfully, but it's about 115, 120 miles each way, depending on what route I take. And we're leaving work with a full battery. We've been able to charge here at the office, and let's see how we get on range-wise for the journey home. I'll also be able to give you a little bit of a review of the Peugeot E-208 and let you know what I think. So if you're not overly familiar with these vehicles, the Peugeot E-208, like a lot of other Stellantis cars, has a 50 kilowatt hour battery, has about 45 kilowatt hours of usable capacity. So like a lot of EVs, there's a little bit of buffer in there. And as I said, you'll find the very same drivetrain set up in a lot of other vehicles. They're definitely making the most of the platform that they've developed. And so the chances are, if you're looking for an EV, you'll probably test drive this drivetrain in some form, because the chances are you'll be considering at least one of the vehicles made by the various Stellantis brands. What I really like about this one, if we look at the exterior of the E-208, it just looks like a Peugeot 208. There's no funky weirdness about it that's like, oh, look at me, I'm electric. And as you know, I really do like that. I like EVs that look like normal cars and that aren't just too much shouting and screaming about being an EV, because at the end of the day, if we're gonna convert the majority of drivers to electric, they're gonna need cars that are just cars. They're not interested in them being like spaceships and being weird and wonderful and looking weird and wonderful. And all right, for some people, that's exactly what they do want. They do want something a bit weird and something a bit different. But an awful lot of people don't. The only real indication that it's electric is the blue E's on each side. And that's literally your only clue that this is an electric version of the 208. And if you look in the brochure, it's just offered as another fuel type. And that sounds bizarre, because you're like, well, of course it is, because it is just another fuel type. But for a lot of manufacturers, that's not the case. The EV range is sold as it's a big deal, let's go electric. But if you look through the Peugeot 208 brochure, you'll find you can choose diesel, petrol, or electric. The electric obviously being more expensive and topping the range, and there's no getting away from that. There's definitely a price premium there. But I think it's an interesting step towards it becoming the norm and just becoming part of the range. This particular vehicle is an Allure Premium, and that's one thing I found while looking at the brochure, is the trim levels are a little bit confusing. They're doing that, I guess you could say, that legacy car maker thing of having loads and loads of different trim levels that give you different levels of equipment. And I don't know, I think a lot of manufacturers could do to simplify things a little bit. I think the very fact, so I think actually now if you buy one of these today, this is a 22 reg, but a brand new one, you can't get Allure Premium, you can get Allure Premium Plus instead, which has a couple of things that this doesn't have. Getting my head around the trim level offerings, even just to talk about it in this video, was pretty difficult, to be honest. It seems that the model range just changed a few times, and even since this car's not very old, of course, and this is just the one that was supplied as a courtesy car, the goalposts have moved a little bit. Now, as far as I can tell, you can't buy this trim level new. One thing that I thought was quite interesting was that I was hoping to precondition before I left this morning at 5:30, and I don't have the app because it's not my vehicle, and I was hoping I could set in the display, the climate settings on the display, that I wanted to leave at a certain time and it would pre-warm the cabin and all that stuff. You can only do that if you have the bigger touch. So this is, I think, there's like a 10-inch touchscreen which is bigger than the one that's in here, and if you have that, it has preconditioning settings, but this one doesn't. I just don't really understand. Like, that kind of stuff should be core functionality. You either offer it or you don't. I don't really understand why that's something that one trim level has that another doesn't. But obviously that would be solved if I had the app, but I don't because it's not my car. In terms of the interior, I'd say it feels a little bit cramped in here, but then it is a smaller car and I'm a bigger chap. It doesn't feel any different to what I was expecting. A Peugeot 208, it feels exactly spot on for the size of vehicle that it is. So I don't know what's going on with this tiny little steering wheel. The steering wheel's very, very small. It feels a little bit like a steering wheel from like an arcade game or something like that. It doesn't feel like a steering wheel from a car. It's smaller than that. It's like a 3/4 size steering wheel, which is really very odd. I'm guessing that's meant to add to the sporty feel, but I do find it a bit weird. I suppose it does give that sort of feeling like you're driving a go-kart, which I suppose is not to be sniffed at, but it is a bit odd. In terms of the dash and stuff, we've got a pretty big reliance on touchscreen as usual with modern cars, so the climate controls and all that are through the touchscreen as well as the radio and all the usual stuff you'd expect to find there. I'm not a fan, so to turn down the temperature in the cabin, you need to go to the climate menu in the touchscreen and then turn it down. There are some buttons in this piano key arrangement here which do certain things, like I can turn the heating off completely by pressing one of them, but I can't turn the temperature up or down, which to me is a core thing that you'd want to do whilst driving without taking your eyes off the road. So yeah, I don't know. We've got some stuff here like the rear window demister and the front of the thing that turns the fans up high to demist the windscreen. It is all here in this odd looking piano key arrangement, but I think ergonomics wise the dash could be a little bit better. It could be a bit better laid out. The speedo binnacle, well, it looks very futuristic with the LCD speedo and you can customize the gauges and all that stuff. I don't know, it's this sort of small letterbox. The way I've got the steering wheel positioned, the steering wheel obscures a decent bit of it. I don't know, I don't really like it, but it's just personal opinion. I'm sure some people will love it, some people will hate it. I'm not that keen. Comfort-wise, pretty good. Seats are quite good, quite supportive, but it's all just a bit bland, I think. But I guess maybe I'm expecting too much from a Peugeot 208. It's not a vehicle that would set the world on fire, and for a lot of people, I'm guessing it'll be absolutely fine. 217 miles is the WLTP range from that 45 kilowatt-hour usable battery, which I can only describe as ambitious. That would represent about 4.8 miles per kilowatt hour, which for an EV is doing well, but I don't think, well, I'm kind of cheating because I already know that this one isn't going to manage that, especially with the weather. It's 5 degrees at the moment. It was 3 degrees this morning. There's no way we're going to see quite that level of efficiency, and I'm going to be driving pretty normally too, so driving towards or at the speed limit on all the roads I'm on, which are primarily motorways and A roads. I'm not going to be crawling along, I'm not going to be slipstreaming trucks or any of that stuff. I just want to use it like a car to get to where I'm going. I'm not going to be making any allowances at all for efficiency, range, nothing like that. It's just going to be a pretty normal drive, just like it would be if it had a petrol or diesel engine. This vehicle does, however, cost, well, in this spec, brand new, was just under £31,000. I believe that the Allure Premium Plus that replaces it, which has a bit more kit, is about £32,000, and the range-topping GT is a little bit more than that, but I actually have seen deals recently for about the same, about sort of 32.5, which seems like a staggering amount of money for a little Peugeot hatchback, but that's the world we live in. I mean, the base model petrol one of these is about 22 grand at list price. Whether you'd actually pay that for one, I don't know. But obviously, as we know with EV value, you will pretty much be paying the list price for the electric versions. Petrol and diesel versions, there might be discounts available, but it's quite staggering just how much new vehicles cost now, no matter what powers them. Infotainment seems relatively easy to use. I'm not sure I like the fact that we've got these buttons. Well, they're not buttons, they're like touch buttons either side of the touch screen, and I need to press them to get to like the radio, the climate, all that stuff. And then I can get to where I want to be. I'm not sure I love that, but it does work and it is responsive. I don't have any problems with the screen lagging or anything like that. It all seems pretty good, pretty responsive, pretty decent, but I still don't like it. I think we have an over-reliance on touchscreens in a lot of modern cars, and this one's no different. So with that 217 mile WLTP range, it at the moment has been showing about 200 to 207 miles with a full charge. So this morning it was 200. Just now when I got in, it showed 207, and I think it's a little bit optimistic, but it shows you even the guessometer itself doesn't think you're going to get near the WLTP range. We've got 2,709 miles on the clock, so and the second trip that hasn't been reset, so it's got a fair bit of learning that it's done from all the various users of this vehicle, and it's still a little bit optimistic on the range front, I think. But so this morning we drove 115 miles, an average speed of 53 miles per hour. Now I'm sure some of you will say, oh, you said you weren't crawling along, but I mean, if you think about it, right, if you're doing 30 and a 30, 40 and a 40, and then you're using motorways doing 70, an average speed of 53 miles an hour is actually quite good going, especially considering the end journeys on the M25, which is not the fastest flowing bit of motorway in the country. So I'd say average speed wise it was pretty healthy, and shows we're not hanging around, and that showed a consumption of 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which I don't think was too bad given it was 3 degrees outside. And so I did 115 miles and it was showing 33 miles remaining when I plugged into the charge. So I was quite impressed with that this morning. No, it's not the 200 miles that it claims when you first get into it fully charged, but I still think it was pretty good going. It'll be really interesting to see what the overall average is by the time I get home, because I haven't reset the trip for this run, so we'll see a full summary for the sort of 220, 230 miles that we covered today. But I think these vehicles, so the E-208, the E-2008, the Mokka, the Corsa, the EC4, all the other various vehicles, the E-Berlingo, there is more, are probably the most complained about I see on forums, on Facebook groups and stuff, as soon as it gets cold. Every winter, people are, oh, I've got an E-208. It doesn't get anywhere near the stated range. I've got to charge it all the time. It's rubbish. And I just don't know what's going on there. I mean, yeah, the WLTP range I do optimistic. I mean, it's not right. So the WLTP is a prescribed test, okay? The manufacturers need to perform that test in a prescribed way, and the results are the results. So you can in theory compare two vehicles to each other based on their test results, because it's a standardized test. However, other manufacturers seem to present a WLTP range that is a little bit more realistic, so I don't know why that might be. But I often see people saying there's absolutely no way, but maybe when the weather's really amazing in the height of the summer and I drive quite slowly, I might get close to that sort of mythical 217 miles range. But most of the time it's below it. And I do think this is going to become a real issue for electric vehicles. And I would like to see more manufacturers actually publish like real world range. Whether that be, we surveyed our customers and this is the kind of range. Now, it's very subjective, okay? Everybody drives differently. Everybody is going to be making different journeys. And so what's what makes it really difficult to produce a real world range. And that's why the test figures are really difficult to actually use, because it's very unlikely you're going to be able to drive like the test cycle. But then the test cycle is meant to be fairly representative, and it all kind of falls down. But I think maybe if manufacturers could gather information from their owners, their drivers, and present like, well, look, 90% of our customers see 4 miles per kilowatt hour from the E-208, therefore the real range is likely to be in the region of 180 miles. I think that would be much more useful. Let me know what you think in the comments. How can manufacturers better present a better idea of range? Because to me, the WLTP isn't quite doing it. It might help you compare between models, but it definitely leads to this kind of disappointment that people see, where they see, oh, it does 217 miles to a charge. Oh no, actually it doesn't, because when I drive it, like this morning, in theory, if we had the 33 to the 115, right, that would be 148 miles to charge, so well under the stated 217. But that is the nature of a standardized test versus the real world. But how do we get better at that? How do we improve that? How do we present people, well, there's actually a 90% chance it'll be this, and then, I don't know. To me, that seems like the best way to make things a bit more realistic for customers, is somehow gather that data and say, well, 90% of people see this amount of range, 95% of people see this amount of range, and set people's expectations better, I do think it would transform people's opinions of EVs. Because if you know exactly what you're buying and exactly what to expect from it, then there's no problem. So the numbers are in. Today we covered 235 miles in this car, averaged 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour at an average speed of 48 miles per hour. So the average consumption didn't change. That was fairly consistent for both the outward and inward journey. I've arrived back with 37 miles range showing on the gasometer, and overall I think I'm quite impressed with that. It's 4 degrees outside, so there's not really been much change in temperature at all day. It's been quite cold all day, and overall I think that's a pretty good performance. As for the E-208, as I said, it all in all is a competent vehicle, and I quite like it. It doesn't excite me, but I don't think any vehicle in this class really would. You know, people, if we sort of ignore the EV thing and go back to sort of little hatchbacks like this, Corsa, Fiesta, 208, that kind of stuff, doesn't really excite anybody, let's be honest, but these cars are really important. These cars are the cars people are going to be learning to drive in. They're the cars that, once they get a little bit cheaper, people are going to be buying as their first car. They're going to be the second car in the family, or for some people it'll be all the car you need. And so they're really important, and actually we need manufacturers to make more and more of this size of car, because this is, and even smaller than this arguably, but you know, these are the vehicles that we need. We don't need the massive SUVs and stuff all the time. And so I think it's really important. Would I buy one? Probably not. It's not really for me. I mean, it's good, and I don't think you'd be disappointed with it, but it's just not really my bag. It's pretty good. It's pretty competent. I'm more than happy to use it. I'd be more than happy, you know, if I rented a car and got given one of these, or again, it was a courtesy car. I'm absolutely happy to use it. I don't think I'd pay, you know, 32 grand for it, but more than happy with it. And I think if this is the kind of vehicle you're looking for, you'll be happy with it as well. I hope this was helpful. It gives you an idea of what it's like to use an E-208 in the real world, especially in the colder weather. I know it's a subject a lot of people get a bit stressed about. Turns out it was absolutely fine. Range definitely a bit lower than the WLTP range, but not so drastic you need to worry too much about it. Just make sure that you understand, you know, if you are making longer journeys, you might need to stop and charge, but certainly for what we did today, it was absolutely fine. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.